It's hard to overstate just how many Backrooms videos and series there are on YouTube. Since the concept first came up in that one simple original post on 4chan, and especially since Kane Pixels started his series about them, the Backrooms have exploded in popularity, driving tons of 3D animators to try and come up with their own take on them. Some are surprisingly good, and some are, well, kinda ass, pardon my French. Seeing as the Backrooms movie is right around the corner and I'm cautiously hyped for it, I wanted to make a video trying to figure out who did it best, you know? Is Kane's series still the be-all end-all, or has it been surpassed? Let's find out together. Since we can't really talk Backrooms without talking about him, let's just start with the OG himself, Kane Pixels. If it wasn't for this guy, the Backrooms would not be what they are today, both in good and bad ways. The first episode of his series has gathered 76 million views at this point. That's insane. And every subsequent upload is no slouch either. I mean, the guy is about to release a whole ass feature film with A24, so you gotta put some respect on the name. It's not hard to see why he became so massive. Even though he wasn't the first to make Backrooms animations, he still got in early enough, at the beginning of 2022. It also seems difficult to deny that he's probably the creator with the best technical chops when it comes to this style of animation. What I want to do now is just go over the whole series briefly and give you my condensed thoughts, because I hadn't rewatched it in a long time and fully expected to not love it as much as I used to. As I said, that first upload is just iconic. Everyone and their dogs has seen it. Now, this is definitely not Kane's best work, but it's easy to see why it became so popular. First of all, the episode gets pretty much straight to the point. A guy is filming something with his friends when he suddenly no-clips through the floor and lands on the dingy carpeted floor of the classic yellow wallpaper Backrooms, ripped straight from the OG image. Some things become immediately clear. Kane's sound design is much better and crisper than most Backrooms videos I've seen so far, both for the ambient sound, the protagonist's voice, and the Foley work.
Hello? Hello?
But the visual quality too, even though it's the first episode, is hard to beat. The camera movements look realistic enough, and at one point he even uses the zoom, which just adds to the feeling that this is a physical object in a physical space. One thing that's also true for Kane, especially in the earlier uploads when compared to many other videos in the genre, is that he moves things along much quicker. Sometimes you have videos where the character explores like 2 rooms and it takes him 10 minutes, because it's all one take and it lingers a lot. Well, as you can notice with Kane, he uses a lot of cuts, trimming out the fat without making anything feel rushed. I don't know, I just noticed that it's engaging and easy to follow as opposed to some other examples we'll see later down the road. From this very first episode, we also already have a big point of contention, at least for me, but I know for many others too. The life form. So if you've seen my video essay on the Backrooms, you'll know that I'm in the group of people who think that having monsters in the Backrooms takes away from the concept. That doesn't mean that it just breaks it for me, because when, in this first upload, we see just little glances of the life form peeking from corners, I think it's very effective and creepy, and plays into that sense of being watched that the original post mentions. The problem is that Kane didn't stop at this, because at some point the protagonist comes face to face with the creature and... look at his goofy ass. I don't know what Kane was smoking when he came up with Squiggle McSquiggles over here, but he wasn't cooking. Listen, I get that the design was supposed to look completely alien, and back in the day I didn't really complain, but looking back on it, it's just kinda shit, not gonna lie. Sorry, you know me, I'm not trying to be mean, but ugh. And it gets 10 times goofier when the thing starts to move. I can't take it seriously. It's as if someone was just flailing around a nutcracker toy. There's a fine line between alien, foreign, surreal, and outright wacky. And this ends up being the latter, in my opinion. If you think I'm exaggerating, then riddle me this, Batman. Why has Kane basically stopped using this creature design for the last years, pretty much? My theory is that he also realized that they didn't quite work. Now, if the creature itself wasn't bad enough, this whole section of the episode basically devolves into a chase scene where the protagonist is just running away from a screaming monster. The problem with this is that it's far from the last time that Kane resorts to this trope, and it gets more annoying each time it happens. It's like, okay, he's being chased by a monster, isn't that scary? I guess. But what about the atmosphere? What about the lingering horror of the unknown? The episode also ends with a very cheap jump scare, which is saved only by the fact that the camera, clipping back into the normal world, starts falling from the sky. That's a pretty hard visual, not gonna lie. Besides that, it's cool to see that even from this early effort, Kane was already interested in using visual storytelling to give us hints for a deeper overarching lore. Whether it be from signs and objects left by other people who've been trapped in the backrooms, or just how the spaces themselves vary instead of being just the same yellow wallpaper room. Good stuff. I also love how there's clearly a bit of ironic humor in Kane's stuff, and I'm sure I'm not the only one to notice this. Here, for example, the moment where the giant exit sign is across the infinite gap of abyssal death, or the fact that the protagonist, after all this bullshit, just circles back into the same yellow-ass rooms he started in.
You gotta be kidding me.
I don't know, I think it adds an extra touch to the series. The last thing I want to mention is just how evocative Kane's work can be sometimes. This will be true for everything he does, and it will get better and better. There are random scenes that make you feel so small and insignificant, or that are just aesthetically nice or bizarre, which is one of the many things that will set Kane apart. Man, looking back at this one after having just rewatched the series, it's genuinely baffling how much better the later stuff looks. Like, this already looks great, but the more recent episodes are just on another level. I have to assume that this gives every other creator in the same space some form of performance anxiety, right? Let's move on for now. With the second upload in the series, we start getting into the weeds. This is where Kane introduces the main overarching plotline in the series, Async, the shady company that opens a portal to the backrooms and basically tries to explore and study it in the hopes of converting it into an infinite storage facility. Now, I'm gonna come out and say it outright, I don't really care for the async stuff. Listen, I don't think it's bad, and it's obviously something that Kane will focus on a lot. I just think that having an organization with advanced equipment and groups of scientists and researchers go into the backrooms kinda takes away from what makes the backrooms so fascinating for me personally. And I know I'm not the only one that feels this way. For me, the backrooms, including Kane's rendition of them, are at their best when we have the sense of isolation that comes from following a single individual in a found footage format. That's also why some backrooms games work so well for me. I find that the exploration of these illogical and surreal spaces is what makes them so fascinating. I talk about all of this stuff in that other video of mine on the subject, and even though a couple of the things I've said haven't aged that well, I still think it's a solid video, so you should totally check it out. The backrooms as a space for me are already fascinating enough as a sort of kaleidoscope of faded but weirdly nostalgic human memories connected through an illogical architecture. Anything extra, like monsters and research teams, for me, shifts the focus away from that fundamental experience that I enjoy so much. Take for example just the fact that Async manages to create a portal to this dimension and they can go in and out at will. This basically commodifies the backrooms and eliminates somewhat the intrinsic horror of randomly no-clipping into that space. I also understand that this is just one point of view on the whole trend, and others prefer to have a sense of imminent danger present or something more to chew on story-wise, and I get it. To be completely transparent with you, I do think that Kane manages, in the long run, to make even the async angle fascinating for me. But this is just a testament to how talented the guy is. It's just that I've seen so many other people lift all of these elements directly from Kane and executing them in a much less intriguing way. Async and yellow hazmat suits are almost synonymous with the trend at this point. We'll talk more about all of this as we keep exploring. Anyway, the second upload itself is basically a slideshow, and it will be apparent that some of the episodes in this series are kind of interim episodes. This is not to say that they don't give us important plot details or don't have their cool moments, but it's safe to say that the longer and fully animated episodes are the ones in which most of the budget, so to speak, went to. So my only note for the third upload was this. It looks really good, even though it's again about async. It's cool to see them eat shit. And I guess that this is just because their whole portal machine thing almost explodes. I don't know, I just thought that was funny when rereading my notes. Again, not much to say about this one. Now, the fourth upload is another shorter one, but this one is already cooler. Here we start with a bunch of missing persons posters plastered around, and this is obviously to suggest that all of these people have vanished by no-clipping by accident into the backrooms. As far as creating a more expansive lore to the series and adding external elements, I thought this was a very cool touch. And I think that this is also where we see the gradual growth in Kane's visual style. This shit looks downright professional. But an interesting fact that I want to point out here is how Kane, even from episode 2, made it clear that the series is not just found footage. It's obvious that that's the primary technique in the series, but there's generally a lot of variation. I mention this because it seems that the film will not be found footage, except maybe some parts, but it will be shot in a traditional cinematic style. I guess my point is just that this doesn't come out of nowhere, and it's obvious that Kane already had an interest in using different styles, so that doesn't really betray the vision in any way, and that just makes me more hopeful for the film. This episode then does cut to found footage from the point of view of async researchers exploring the backrooms. Not much to say here except that it looks good. I'll add that the reveal of the rotting guy on the floor is quite disturbing, but that I also don't really care for the whole fungus infecting stuff in the backrooms that Kane seems to add from this moment on. Once again, I feel like it's kind of an unnecessary addition, but hey, it's his vision. The fifth one is an informational video, and we got more async stuff. Now, the main thing about this episode is a plot point that will be relevant later, with Peter Tench getting teleported in time when he moves away from his squad after hearing people's voices, which will lead to some cool stuff. But the main thing once again is seeing async eat shit. While them exploring the backrooms and having all of this equipment does take something away, it's clear that they're in way over their heads and in constant danger. It's a nice way to balance things out. I do want to shout out a moment from this episode though, when Tench comes into this weird ass room. It's again one of those moments that show you how unique Kane's environmental designs can be. This is top tier glitch surreal backrooms content right here, and I'm all for it. Episode 6, Autopsy Report, is once again basically a slideshow about the rotting body they found 2 episodes ago. Again, not a fan of the fungal infection angle. It's clear that Kane tries to build his own lore and context on top of the simple backroom stuff. He even says in that one Smosh interview that he already had the ideas before the backrooms, and that they were basically just something to wrap around the story he had already envisioned.
A lot of the stuff in the series was coming from a combination of ideas I had had floating around in my head for a while. So most of it is predating the backrooms idea. The backrooms is more of just a texture to wrap over everything.
This either works for you or it doesn't. For now, I'm somewhat lukewarm on it. Now we're at video 7, motion detected, and hey, look, more async stuff, hooray! Alright, I'll stop being a Debbie Downer, I'm sorry, I'm annoying. I'll stop complaining about async. I guess it is fascinating to see them build infrastructure inside the backrooms, and it's a unique angle if nothing else. Also, Kane's visual effort keeps getting better and better. It's already pretty insane at times how realistic stuff looks by now. Kudos. Of course, he's possibly working with some budget at this point, but still, muy bueno. And did I mention that he makes the music himself? It fits the series very well and it's very atmospheric. And you know, I always appreciate things like this. I also make my own music. Although it is funny that we have a soundtrack for found footage stuff, but he wouldn't be the first at this point to use the found footage simply as a stylistic choice and not to make us think that it's real. Toto, I have a feeling we're not in the Blair Witch Project anymore. Here we also have a more subtle approach to the creatures, which definitely works much better, because you're asking yourself, what am I even looking at, instead of this goofy ass. For Prototype, I honestly have nothing to say, really. It just shows Async creating some machine probably used to open the portal. Anyway, immediately after that, we have Pitfalls, which is a big one. This is where our lovely researchers go to explore the backrooms, as they do, and our resident goofball Marv falls through one of the holes in the ground, finding a completely different environment. At the start of this one, we can notice that Kane is starting to use green screens and real people, which once again shows him trying different styles of filmmaking. While the animation is already great at this point, it can still give us some kinda goofy moments, like the guy tiptoeing across in this scene. It just kinda looks wrong. And can I just say that async is kind of stupid? Like, do they really take no precautions when crossing this room? It would be so easy for someone to, oh, and there he goes. God damn it. So, about 8 minutes in, he reaches the new area. As much as these kinds of places that Kane comes up with sometimes feel less classically backroomy to me, I always appreciate the creativity, and they help cement his work as his own. I mean, you can't deny that this is very evocative. And seeing how many different aesthetics and levels have been added to the backrooms at this point, it's really just a matter if you're a weird purist or not when it comes to appreciating stuff like this. It plays a lot with the proportions of space, which I personally find adds a lot of depth. Here Marv keeps hearing a man call out for help, and as you can imagine, he'll realize that this is no man at all. And it's crazy how many people use the mimic horror trope, like the Mandela Catalog and even Gemini Home Entertainment. I think it all comes from 4chan Skinwalker stories, but that's just my conspiracy theory. Visually, all of this is pretty damn crazy, and it should be easy to see why it captured so many viewers so effectively. When we have the final creature encounter here, it once again kinda loses me, while the
That is not a fucking person!
Line would be chilling. Just look at that goofy motherfucker. Like, come on, I cannot for the life of me find that creepy. Also, we once again have the protagonist runs away while a screaming monster runs after him shtick. How original. It's cool that Marv makes it out alive though in the end. The next one is Report, and it's another shorter one. This time we have a full-on adoption of real actors and locations, and again can notice the natural progression towards a feature film. And this is probably the episode with the biggest shift that made people go, damn, this guy is getting a real budget now. Once again though, a little light on the Backrooms for a Backrooms series, to be honest. In episode 11, Presentation, we get a presentation on what Async's plans are for the complex, as they call it. The actual visual style here is reminiscent of classic analog horror videos with these simplified designs. I do love the style of it. At about 2.5 minutes, we also have some cool visual representation of the size of the backrooms. But most of all, what gets me in this one is the idea of them thinking about people potentially living in the backrooms. This is pretty crazy as a concept. Maybe it would have been more fascinating to see that reality in an episode set in the future or something, but my guess would be that they never really get there. But also, who would live in such a place? Well, I guess that people live in like 2 square feet apartments in Manhattan, so you'd always find someone. Rent would probably be cheap as hell. Also, who the hell is getting some of these shots? Kane has clearly never stuck to the real recovered footage kind of deal, but it's funny to imagine they had a photographer there just milling about. You know, also what this reminds me of, it's like when in video games they don't have the budget for real cutscenes, so they only use still renders of the characters. Anyway, yeah, not much else to add. But then, alas, in the 12th upload, we are back to found footage goodness. It's once again just a random person who this time notices that a spot in her house has some pretty weird properties. Whatever she drops into it just goes through, and as you can imagine, she ends up falling through herself and having to survive inside le Backrooms. The blue duct taped no-clip square is iconic at this point and genuinely such a genius idea, also a clear reference to The Caretaker. It's possibly the coolest part of the series for me because of how it grounds everything. If you've ever seen Primer, that's what some of Kane's stylistic decisions remind me of. I guess you'd call it hard science fiction. I also love this procedural way of exploring the Backrooms phenomenon, and obviously I'm happy that this also finally plays into the no clipping out of reality fear again, which had been a bit neglected. As our protagonist explores, I noticed that the episodes did become a bit slower as opposed to the very first one, which makes them slightly harder to pay attention to, but also more realistic. They let you bask in the atmosphere, and I'm all here for it. This stuff now just looks real, basically, especially thanks to the camera movement that Kane perfected by this point. In this episode, we still get more intriguing visual elements that make it a standout. I love the tall furniture at around 3 minutes, for example. It's so uncanny and plays into that idea that the backrooms are just imitating human spaces with no real understanding of how it works, and maybe glitching out at times and creating these weird shapes. I don't know if Kane was the first to do it, but it works so damn well. And I really love how we see more variety in the structure, even though it's still the usual yellow wallpaper rooms. But Kane really starts to play with layouts and objects. As a creator, he seems very much in control of his vision. Up until this point, we haven't really gotten any memorable character. Most of them are pretty anonymous, and the protagonist from Found Footage 2 is no different. But at about 4 minutes, she asks an absolute banger of a question.
What is this place even for?
Look, I might be overthinking things here, but that's an amazing line for me. It's not the usual, what is this place, or where am I? There's something much more existential in the way she phrases the question, because we normally think of interior man-made spaces as created for specific uses, while the backrooms seem devoid of purpose, and this short-circuits our brains. This plays perfectly in what I think makes the backrooms so spooky. And man, just when you think that he can get any crazier on a technical level, we get this shot through a keyhole. I know nothing of 3D animation, but I bet my ass that this shot takes a crazy amount of work to pull off well, with how the camera's focus works and stuff. Perhaps it is just like an automatic plugin or something, and it's not something that Kane had to do manually, but still, details like this help sell the physicality of these spaces better than anything else. Of course, the episode also has an iconic set piece with the car that crashed into the Backrooms, which we see how that could have happened in a later unlisted video. It's pretty crazy to think that a whole car could randomly no-clip into the Backrooms, and it suggests that perhaps the barrier between the two worlds is becoming increasingly unstable. I don't know, this is not a lore video as you can tell. It's just cool how many things Kane hints at in this series. It feels much larger than what we're shown in the episodes themselves, and it's like he's only showing us a little peek behind the curtain. At this point, our protagonist of course decides to be a horror protagonist and starts following the trail of blood, or soot, or fungus, or whatever this is on the ground, because... Here once again we get more of the fungus infection theme, and once again I don't really find it necessary. The Backrooms are creepy enough on their own, but the jump scare at around 10 minutes 40 actually got me for some reason. I guess it's just that Kane rarely uses jump scares, so like the 2 or 3 times he does, they hit like a truck. And guess what? Once again we have the protagonist running away from a screaming monster. Okay, haven't seen that before. For a brief moment during the chase, we finally get the pool rooms, my favorite. Then this happens. Again, related to the fungus, I guess, or something. I don't care for the green stuff, that's all I'll say about it. I'll add though that the lifeform was shown so little this time around that it didn't seem goofy as hell. I wish Kane used this same approach from the start. So overall, this one was pretty thrilling, and I prefer it much more to the async stuff. Even though I have my small complaints, this is still a masterpiece by YouTube horror standards. Kane is pretty much unbeatable when it comes to technical quality. In the next one, remember, we get a bit of a change of pace. This is a bit of a poetic and artsy piece between the bigger uploads. I like it. I like the experimentation and the creative vision. It all adds to the uniqueness and variety of Kane's series. But I don't really have much to say about it beyond that. While in Reunion, we get back to Async's shenanigans. They finally smartened up for once, as they're using ROVs instead of people for the first section of the exploration. Baby steps, Async, baby steps. While taking notes at this moment, I was literally starting to write how anonymous all the characters in the series have been so far, and how I wish that Kane would write some more dialogues or memorable lines. But it's literally at this point that we actually start to get some light banter between them, which helps a lot in humanizing them. I like these little character moments we get, especially the lines...
Wouldn't want to be on the other end of that.
You wouldn't want to be on the other end of any gun, Marvin.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah, Marv, you idiot, shut up. We see some familiar areas, like the pitfalls, and I love the detail of one piece of the ground being just randomly wrong or different from everything else. Again, Kane's second name should be Details. Kane Details Parsons. Rolls off the tongue. But here I also started thinking and remembered a perfect comparison for why these async sections hit less for me when compared to the found footage episodes. It's kind of like the difference between Rec 1 and 2. You basically got the same movie, but the first is seen through the eyes of a reporter and a cameraman, people who are absolutely not ready for what they get into, while the second one has an actual SWAT team going in, and while they're way in over their head and don't know what awaits them, the fact that they are trained and have equipment and are a team definitely takes away from how creepy the situation is. And that's kind of the way I feel about the async teams. They've even got a gun this time. Of course, if you've seen the series, you know that they immediately eat shit once again and their gun is snatched from them. It's a damn cool and crazy twist at the end to see Peter Tench come back, with no hazmat suit mind you, and hold our crew at gunpoint. A bit Hollywood, but still pretty gripping. Though it kinda plays in that the real monster is humans, or I guess shady agencies in this case, which is not a bad move, but kinda shows you how the Backrooms can end up being more so set dressing. I don't know, is that too harsh? Video 15 is Overflow, and it's another middle episode teaser kind of thing. Then in Damage Control we have the suits trying to show transparency to the async employees after Tench's pretty public escape. The escape itself is cool, and stuff like this really shows you how easily Kane's story can be adapted to a film. There's much more here than just the Backrooms, and this is both a curse and a blessing, because your enjoyment of it depends on what you expect from Backrooms content. I know I might sound like a bit of a purist, or I mean it's weird to say a purist in this case because the Backrooms has always been a collective phenomenon, never having one single established role role or purpose, but still, I've explained in my last essay about the Backrooms how I like him, and this goes way outside of those limits. But a cool, gripping story is also hard to hate, so I'm not gonna be a contrarian here. This is commendable work. I also like how this episode establishes that async is not just cartoonishly evil, it's not the CIA. While it's obvious that they're using corpo speak, they are still technically providing clear and detailed explanations for their employees. But then at the end, it seems reasonable to believe that they're lying once more about Tench's death and that he's still out there, so oops, they did it again. But still, in a lesser project, the big corporation would already be torturing and sacrificing people, while here the approach seems more realistic.
The idea of this sort of militarized research group that has like a giant big evil building and like basements with all these anomalies in it and all these things, but that's never really been the idea. With async, I've always thought of it more as like, rather than that, it's kind of framed more like a dentist office, like in terms of atmosphere that comes into contact with the Backrooms, and it's kind of, we're seeing their process sort of upscaling and merging with an actual government agency.
Somebody might say that all of this exposition kinda ruins the mystery or the pleasure of putting the story together on your own. I can see that, but for how many similar projects end up giving you way too little or being way too abstract, I can appreciate the choice here to be more straightforward, especially because there are still many things that we don't know, so it's not like this particular part really ruins the whole, but still important to mention. So between this video and the next found footage part, we have a big break because Kane decided to work on the oldest view. But when he gets back to the Backrooms, you can see some things have changed. Because this is a behemoth of an episode at 45 minutes. Absolute insanity. And more than that, we have an actual character in a found footage episode for once. The guy basically gets home and hears some noise in his basement. When he goes to check it out, he finds a broken window as if someone or something launched itself through it. He starts looking around and Jesus Christ! Out of all the damn spooky moments in the series, out of all possible jump scares, a sudden poster of Arnold Schwarzenegger made me feel like my soul left my body through my asshole. This is vicious work. Of course, he had to end up in the backroom somehow, and the transition from real footage to 3D is pretty much seamless. You can only tell that the camera movement is a bit different. It's also interesting to see a physical break to the backrooms this time, instead of just no clipping, which I know I said was part of the horror, but variety is still welcome. In this one you can tell how he's improved even more if that was possible while working on the oldest view. This is just like... honestly, it gives me an inferiority complex and I don't even create animations. Even just how realistic the voice sounds inside the space, it's so good. And how the lights and shadows change, simulating the camera's aperture. Like the blur, I don't know if that's just like an easy thing to do or a thing that automatically happens in Blender, like path tracing or some shit, so I might sound silly. But if it is something they had to actually work on, like create a realistic simulation of light, that's amazing. Again, if you do this kind of stuff, let me know in the comments if this is at all impressive. And one thing that often gets overlooked is Foley work, which in this one especially goes hard. And while Kane's environmental design has been top-notch so far, look at this. He's become even more dang creative. There's a ton of interesting stuff to see here while our protagonist explores around. I especially love the piece of sky at around 12 minutes and 40 or so. It's disorientating as hell. The backrooms are already disorientating enough on their own, but until the characters find ridiculously large rooms or something, there might still be that rationale of, oh, I'm underground in some sort of hidden or forgotten mysterious bunker. But seeing something like this immediately makes the character question his elevation, and this would obviously make you doubt the logic of everything you see immediately. Of course, this is also the episode where we get the iconic kids carpet with the town on it, which is a very nice touch and plays in that vague nostalgia that the backrooms might elicit at times. As the protagonist reaches a different section, he hears something and realizes that he's not alone. And at about 18 minutes and a half, we get what is genuinely a super creepy moment, possibly the spookiest one in the series.
Hello? Hey!
I know it's not exactly original, but it makes things even more uncanny, because so far we've never seen an entity behave like this. Mostly they've just run after the character, while here it almost seems like they're playing games. In this upload we also have some of Kane's most insane set pieces. The Red City is absolutely ridiculous and plays hard into that House of Leaves kind of vibe when it comes to scale and space making no sense in its proportions. But then we get the room with the speakers playing music and the huge tower of audio equipment. They all stick in your mind because of how unique they are. While we, once again, have the protagonist being chased by something, this time I feel like it's handled much better. It's not a constant chase with a screaming monster, it's much creepier for the fact that he never knows if he's still being chased and even stops a few times. To me, this feels much more nightmarish, at least for the nightmares I've had of being chased. For me, it's never been a constant chase. I feel like that would have woken me up immediately. It's always been more so a hide-and-seek type of situation. Maybe that's just me though. After a while, we actually get a brief look at the monster, and I find it so much creepier that this time it's like an infected person instead of the usual spindly nutcracker looking ass life form. This feels more grounded, but most importantly, it's well animated and doesn't look goofy as hell. As the protagonist keeps getting away, we briefly see a picture of Mao in the Backrooms, and it's actually hilarious to me for some reason. And my god, just look at that city view, that's amazing. This episode is such a roller coaster of both horror and wonder. Of course, I can't forget to mention the cardboard cutout of the caveman, which is just a very bizarre thing to add, but I love the fact that they brought it back for the film. And when the protagonist goes through areas like this, it's so weird, because you start asking yourself if Async actually started using the backrooms as storage space, or if this is just the backrooms doing their thing and imitating normal world. It makes you question the timeline of events and just the logistics of everything that's slowly unfolding in the story. And if you want to see just how good Kane's visual storytelling is in a more obvious scene, when he reaches the house towards the end here, there's so many implications done by just the environment alone. Have different people been here and been dragged off by something? Why are their clothes left here? If they were consumed, so to speak, on the spot, there would have been more traces, but these only go into those little openings. Have the people done this to themselves? Kind of like when freezing people take off their clothes because they start feeling hot? Perhaps the infection had a similar result and then for some reason those people ran off through the openings? So many questions. Also, for some reason, the detail of a lawnmower being there is kinda hilarious to me. I get that it might be seen as creepy because the backrooms are imitating normal human spaces without knowing the real purpose of stuff, but I don't know, it's just slightly goofy. Then there's also the surreal scene inside the house. You can see footprints leading outside of it, on the table you can see a bottle of whiskey, and the chairs are overturned, and so you know that something definitely happened here. The shoe clipping through the floor is a pretty nice touch too. In the house we can hear a man speaking, and after our protagonist calls out to him, we slowly start to realize that they might be in the same space at the same time, but can't see each other. Or that the man is behind the wall, making this a sort of mirror version of his real house. Honestly, this whole scene is surreal and it almost doesn't even seem like something out of the Backrooms, but in a good way. It feels unique and creepy, and it's like overlapping spaces or like a mirror dimension or something. Of course, this is all especially sold by the voice acting, which deserves some praise here.
I can open up the wall here, it's still loose, but I need you to move slowly, alright?
Thank you.
Come out with your hands first. I want to see your face. And we'll take things from there.
Thank you. I think it's...
What the fuck? What the fuck? What? Oh my god. Oh my god, wow, what the fuck?
The guy then gets demolished by something and things go crazy. After this, we see that our protagonist made it out alive, but it's obvious that he's not doing very well. It looks like he's eating his own hair. And on that, it's cool that Kane doesn't go for the trope of you don't feel hunger or tiredness in the backrooms that many seem to go along with. In these backrooms, you have to eat and drink and poop. And that's just terrifying, unless you find the toilet level, which I'm sure that's a thing. So even if I have my criticisms for the first entries, I can't really say anything bad about this monster of an episode. It's an absolute feat and it's gonna be probably impossible to find something that even comes close to topping it, but I'll try. And Kane came out swinging here, because after this banger we got what is probably the most fascinating episode in the series, lighting and tile test, which is just what it sounds like. It's literally somebody examining the lights and tiles in the backrooms by listing all the materials they're made of and not much else. Kane is almost doing something profane by taking apart the backrooms. The genius part is that it makes the mystery even deeper instead of taken away from it. Because instead of just the infinite lamps, now you got things like, we couldn't isolate the power source, so you start thinking about that. about where all the energy in the backrooms comes from, about why there's insulation under the upper floor. It's also great how the measurements of the tiles and lights are not standard. It adds to the idea of the backrooms generating themselves as a distorted image of normal human architecture. I also bet that for the biology and chemistry enthusiast out there, this section is super cool. Once in a blue moon, you also get your fill. Now we'll go back to watching Scavenger's Reign for the 5th time or something. So even though this is just a lot of listing parts and materials over pictures, the sheer weirdness of it all makes it possibly one of the most gripping entries yet. It's like we get a little peek behind the curtain, but instead of getting some info, we're even more confused than before. I wish more in-between episodes were this interesting, but of course now the time frames in which Kane works and his budget have grown, so that's what we might see in the future. The final episode released so far is Static Dead End, and it's a short one. It's mostly just developing Marv's character a bit more, showing that he's become scared of async after the whole Peter Tench debacle and probably wants out, and then we're just shown more glitchy and unnatural areas in the backrooms. I found it a very cool touch to have these stretched textures that harken immediately back to glitched digital spaces and automatically to the whole no clipping in a video game thing. There's really not much to say here except that it seems like another interim episode that pushes the async story slightly forward and shows us what looks like a more unstable area of the backrooms, where things seem to be glitching out even more than usual, being stuck in the walls and whatnot. So after this we finally have the trailer for the A24 Backrooms movie, and it honestly looks surprisingly good. It's not like I put much faith into A24 even though they have released some bangers, but for every bring her back they have an undertone. Which, shut up, it was a goofy-ass film that felt like it was written by an AI and people should feel ashamed for shilling it. It honestly deserves its own video at some point. Anyway, Kane was always going on about how much creative freedom A24 gave him, which could just be empty words, but looking at the trailer might not be. The film seems to be aesthetically solid from what we've been shown, and it seems like it will also include some found footage style sections, which is a great touch. As I've said throughout, it's pretty clear that Kane was looking to spread out to different mediums. He started implementing non-diegetic scenes or omniscient shots, and started using actors and green screens instead of always keeping everything 3D animated. So a Backrooms feature film with traditional cinematography and a mix of found footage seems like a pretty natural point of progression from what we've seen. This is the main thing that makes me hopeful, really. I expect the film to either bring a resurgence of Backrooms content or to completely kill the hype around them. I guess it all depends on how well it lands with the audience. One thing I really appreciate is how it supposedly ties into Kane's series.
Because the film isn't the finale or anything, it's more of just think of it as a large episode of the YouTube series that's sort of told in a slightly different way.
I don't know if I've ever seen a feature film be officially part of a bigger story that takes place primarily on YouTube. It is exciting. So overall, what can we really say about Kane Pixels series? I'm not gonna lie to you, I went into this rewatch fully expecting to find that it wasn't as good as I remembered and to put Kane at something of a baseline B tier maybe. I thought it would be even cool and exciting for the video because it would imply there's better stuff out there. And while sure, I do have some criticisms here, like the async stuff, especially at the start not being my cup of tea, me not caring for the whole fungal infection angle, thinking that most of the characters are non-existent up to a certain point, the life form being an incredibly goofy villain of sorts, and there being too many moments devolving into a chase scene with a screaming monster. Yes, there is all of that. But there's also the fact that this is one of the most technically marvelous horror projects you can find on YouTube, with incredible sound and graphic design, with a beautiful handling of both classic and very original Backrooms locations, that stands out for its expansion both in lore and in style, with the light adoption of mixed media, with an atmospheric soundtrack and a gripping overarching story that seems both clear and mysterious at the same time. And this is all without mentioning just how influential and iconic this series has become for both YouTube horror, analog horror, Backrooms content, and YouTube content in general. All of this makes it impossible for me to categorize Kane's Backrooms as anything but S tier. Sure, it has some minor flaws, but the good is so extremely good that I find it hard to believe that anyone could come to a comparable level. But who knows, they might add something specific and nice to the table that's gonna sway me for more S tiers. One last thing I want to say is that for how much I love this project, I would still take People Still Live Here and The Oldest View especially over it, which just shows you that this guy just keeps breaking his own quality roof. There's no stopping this mad lad. I mean, The Oldest View was basically the main reason for which I wrote the first essay I published on this channel, so yeah, it has an important place in my heart. For now, let's leave Kane's amazing project and move on to the next. After rewatching Kane, I started wondering, wait, he started making videos like 3 years after the initial Backrooms post. There has to be stuff that was made before, right? And I came across something that caught my attention. Into the Backrooms by Evan Royalty came out all the way back in October 2019. I mean, guy's practically a visionary. It follows the story of two cops responding to a call and, well, one of them ending up in the backrooms while investigating. Simple as. But do you notice anything strange? Because I noticed something strange. This has been made in GTA 5 and it just fills my heart. Now, I don't know if you young ones still fuck with machinimas, but back in my day, those were the shit. For the few that don't know, machinimas were a big trend around the 2010s where people used to simply make original short films using video games, some putting in a ton of effort. I used to play sandbox games pretending I was making a machinima video without actually ever filming one, but I'd just make up my own stories for the characters and kinda play them out in game. The trend's kinda fallen off now that everyone and their moms apparently learned how to animate in Blender, but it's still very much in my and many other people's hearts. And listen, if Phil Solomon, rest his soul, could make art house short films using GTA San Andreas and have it considered real art, then there's no reason for which this couldn't fit as well. So I'll say it outright, this is a very cool video. The biggest problem for this ranking we're making, I guess, is that it doesn't feel much like the Backrooms we're used to. It's like the creator saw the post and used the concept but then just ran with his own ideas, which I personally appreciate because it makes this different and it's cool to see such an early interpretation of the meme. So to put it briefly, what happens is that a cop, James Richmond, is driving around on patrol and gets a call about a disturbance at a house. When he arrives there, another cop is sent for backup. The two enter the house and as they're looking for any signs of life, James clips through the floor and ends up in the backrooms. You can already see that this doesn't really look like the original picture. It's grimier and grayer, it feels more like a basement. I guess they had to work with what they had in the Rage engine, but we do hear the buzz of the fluorescent lights, which is a staple of the genre. Obviously confused, James starts exploring the space, and we got what has become the usual type of mandatory sequence for this kind of video. At some point, he comes across a sleeping bag suggesting that someone has been living down here. He starts hearing weird spooky noises and at one point crawls through some vents and comes across areas that seem more like something out of Silent Hill. At some point, a voice starts talking to him on his radio and tells him to keep going. The coolest moment in this is a brief one where he reaches a different area that's much larger than the previous ones. Then he walks into a sort of weird stadium-like space with low poly people sitting in the bleachers and staring at him. This is also where we have some cool moments when it comes to editing, which help to break the monotony of the bodycam style footage. By the end, he comes across a computer and the voice talks to him once again, saying that he loves to play video games and that somehow their game found him. But it wasn't good enough and he had to change things around and disfigure this world to make it his own. Which stunned me, because this is a meta commentary on modding and machinimas themselves, the act of modifying a game to suit one's vision. I didn't expect this at all and found it to be such an original addition to this project. Sure, it's kinda low stakes for the viewer because it's all just video games, but I love the meta aspect of it. James is then transported to the first area where he comes face to face with a humanoid monster that starts chasing him, before he falls through the floor again and finds himself back in the normal world. So this was genuinely a treat for me. If it was just a simple first-person machinima of a backrooms exploration, I would have already liked it. But the fact that we have some clear effort put into the editing and this whole meta-narrative twist elevated it from just cool to respectable. Again, very interesting to see such an early adoption of the backrooms, and to see how different it is from what we're used to at this point. I'll put this one at a solid B tier, which I know it could seem low, but for me that's still good. It's just that when you see how much effort is put into some of these other animations, you gotta give them a spot above a GTA 5 machinima, regardless of how cool it might be. And again, the fact that it doesn't feel that backroomsy lowers it slightly on this particular list of ours. Next up we have one of your suggestions, and it is NDR animations. Damn, this is a long one. Let's go, I guess. I had never heard of this Backrooms series, so I went in blind, and if I had to describe it in one word, it would be trippy. The series starts as others do in the normal world. Some teenager is just filming at his house with a friend when suddenly, as he goes to throw some trash in the trash bin, the whole darn thing clips right through the floor and he soon follows suit. From here on, we'll have a pretty extensive look at the Backrooms as envisioned by NDR. And if you like a slow series that focuses on exploration and does away with entities and useless things like characters, then oh boy have you come to the right place. Having just reached the end of NDR's project, I'll already tell you what is probably my biggest complaint about it. As soon as the protagonist lands in the backrooms, there must be some tongue-eating cat patrolling the halls, cause nothing, and I mean nothing, can make this guy utter a syllable. Dude is stone cold. And when you pair this with how languid the pacing of this whole project is, much more so than anything that Kane made, well, I'm not gonna lie, it kinda made me doze off a couple of times. Even considering this though, it's still peak. Thank you to Ryan Robinson for the suggestion. The first video, Mall Run, gives us a pretty good idea of the creator's approach to the backrooms. We have the already mentioned inciting incident of our guy falling down through the floor. Immediately though, this common trope is made more interesting by the fall itself, for you see, he's not just suddenly on the other side, he actually falls off from a great height, showing us immediately a different use of space in this specific project. And then we see like a sectioned perspective of the backrooms, which like, who is filming this? Oh, no way. That's a title card? That's amazing. Strong start. So as the protagonist gets up and starts exploring, this looks obviously a bit faker than Kane's stuff. And it's not just due to the textures and the camera movements, but also because the camera focus and lights don't look as realistic, which is something I praised so much in Kane's stuff. And this is not just to compare everything to Kane, it wouldn't be right, it's just to say that even when things look a bit less realistic, that doesn't really matter to me. Obviously, Kane is like the god of the backrooms, and we can't hold it against smaller creator to not have the same chops and budget as he does, so I will not hold things like this against these projects, unless they're egregious. In this case, I'll also tell you that NDR's chops keep improving throughout the episodes, which I personally love even more than having everything be perfect and unchanging since the start. And there's just like cool touches here and there, like our guy comes across an elevator and we can see that it has hundreds of buttons, which I find to be very cool, and he might be cooking here. He comes out into a mall type area, which is always a win location for me. There's just something special about dead malls. If that wasn't cool enough though, look at this sense of scale, at how this familiar space is immediately distorted into something mind-boggling. Here we also hear strong wind gusts, and I realized how good the sound effects work already sounds. Again, this is something that some creators underestimate, so it's good to point out whenever it's well handled. As he finds a door that leads him back into the yellow wallpaper rooms, the door behind him disappears. And at first I thought that this is a bit too overt for me, because I'm not a big fan of the backrooms changing before our eyes. I like them more as a static space, but this will end up being something that sets the series apart in the end. You'll see what I mean. There's some more great moments that show us a sense of immense scale, and things are pretty cool, but this is where my hands started itching for that 1.5 speed button, and even cool visuals like these, where we see a glitched out space in the backrooms, couldn't hold my attention enough. So I'm not proud to say it, but I kinda just started skipping forward a bit. But bro, come on, the fact that it really doesn't make much of a difference is not exactly a good sign, is it? The protagonist then comes into a room where we have kind of a cool set piece with all of these missing persons posters spread on the ground, which could be a bit of a callback to Kane's use of missing persons maybe. And the twist of having the protagonist see his own missing poster is pretty cool. So this is definitely not a bad start, but I need more, and fortunately there will be more. In the second video, Outpost, we have the protagonist following the blue arrows he came across at the end of the last one, and while he still never speaks, at least this time we can hear him breathing, which makes it finally feel like there's somebody behind the camera. So we have the usual exploring and perusing and lollygagging until he comes across this. And okay, yeah, we're ballin'. So this thing is the titular Outpost, and after a while our guy manages to walk up to it, and the first thing he immediately does is pull a random lever that says emergency override. Like, don't you wanna at least try to understand what it activates? Seems a bit brash, doesn't it? Fortunately, it ends up opening the main gate, and I have no way to prove it, but I am sure that the siren sound was made by voice. Listen to it. So it's clear that some group is working inside the backrooms, and this explains all the path indicating arrows. The protagonist finds some tapes with info about the research happening here. They're made with this cool line art style, which seems like a bit too much effort for a simple presentation, but I don't know, maybe these guys have a social media manager or something. It shows us their adoption of rovers to map out the usable paths in the backrooms, and how these are then adapted to also take wall samples. Seems like a bit of a complicated and DIY way to do it, but what the hell, sure. One thing you'll start to notice here is NDR's obsession for animating mechanisms, a pretty peculiar but very cool distinguishing trait of the project. Remember how I said that the use of blur effects wasn't as good as Kane's? Well, at around 19 minutes, where we look at the hole in the wall, we actually get an amazing moment with it, so big kudos to you. It's fascinating to see how the backrooms are interpreted by Andy. It's like different sections are just suspended in dark nothingness, and this clearly reflects what real no-clipping in video games can show you. So I don't know if I love this whole backrooms repair themselves thing, though it made for a very cool moment here where the second hole made by the rover suddenly reveals a new room behind the wall instead of nothingness. It will become increasingly clear going forward that while there's no entities in this project, the backrooms themselves seem to be alive to some capacity. They're like a giant moving and self-healing organism. So the protagonist realizes that besides him stands the portal to the normal world. The problem is that it can't be activated in the backrooms. He finds out that there's a second outpost which supposedly has an emergency portal, and that to reach it he has to follow the orange arrows. I like how the creator starts building some semblance of a story here, and obviously this one feels a lot like some sort of survival horror game. It kind of reminded me of Soma. You know, you have a random guy exploring a dangerous place that has the long abandoned outposts of a research team, and he has to go from outpost to outpost trying to find a way out. It's cool. Doesn't feel like a real narrative, so to speak, but it moves things forward. Here Andy also has a how Backrooms videos are made, which is honestly a great watch and shows you just how much work, especially ingenuity, goes into all of this. Huge kudos, I could never. Also, Jesus Christ, it took 39 days to render these 2 videos? My god! And he uses a real VHS camera to re-record the whole thing off a screen. This guy is insane. I'm very excited for the next entries. Also, now I feel bad for skipping forward when each frame is a minute of this guy's patience, but you know, hard work doesn't always necessarily translate to engaging results, unfortunately. In the third episode, Path, we have our main guy following the path of orange arrows. At around 1 minute, he rounds a corner and we have this very cool and trippy illusion effect, where the hallway seems to lead to a different overlapping space. This is very, very nice, although in the long run I feel like Andy's going to abuse this effect a little bit. You'll see what I mean. It's here that things really start to get trippy as hell. Not only do we have that non-Euclidean space from before, but there's also stuff like this. He walks into a house and the interior is all upside down. The more he explores and the trippier it gets, especially when he drops down, or up, I guess, to the lower, higher level. After the house, we also get a little moment in the pool rooms. Yippee! At around 6 minutes 20, we get another one of those non-Euclidean space shifts and I want to barf. And then we get another one. Okay, you see what I mean, right? That's already 3 times he uses the same trick. It's kind of like he's just trying to show off. Anyway, at least this does make for some cool traversal ideas, where he now comes out into the area he saw below just a moment ago. Now you're thinking with portals. Fast forwarding a bit, it's cool how in this area he hears a noise and runs away, but when he turns around there's nothing following him. It might sound like a broken record, but these videos always work best when they're playing into your paranoia without showing you what's actually out there. And it's here that the path gets cut off. He lost the only thing guiding him. You see, I was thinking, isn't having a beaten path kind of the opposite of what makes the backrooms spooky? You know, getting lost? But Andy manages to use it to his advantage, because when that's suddenly taken away, you're like,
Oh, shit!
Also, this should appear obvious by now, but this feels very much like its own thing based on environments alone. The colors he chooses, the textures, while they're not always the most interesting, they do look different from most other Backrooms series. And again, it's interesting how different creators play with different spaces. Kane's are often more claustrophobic, only sometimes showing us giant rooms, while here a lot of the spaces are enormous. By the end, the lucky guy finds the arrows again. Here there's another behind the scenes type video, how to make better Backrooms videos, and it's so fascinating to me. I'm a total layman when it comes to 3D animation, so to me this all looks very impressive. It's clear that Andy R puts a lot of work and passion into this project and strives for constant growth and betterment. If that isn't commendable, I don't know what is. And when he explains some of this stuff, I'm just like the double render for the illusion effect he uses a few times. It's clear why he keeps using it, because when you come up with something like this, you gotta flaunt it. The fourth entry is Outpost 2, and as you can guess, it features the protagonist reaching said outpost. It's here that the emergency portal is located, and after watching a recording about it, he activates it and just gets out. Wait, that's it? He made it? Well, that was oh, damn. That's so cool. The whole room is just painted to look like the outside. What the hell is going on? As he gets back into the backrooms, we start seeing some big holes in the wall, which again show us how the backrooms seem to be almost organic. I want you to notice here how good these reflections on the parquet floor are. You can obviously see how realistic the project is getting. We have once again the use of the illusion trick. It's not the last one yet. Also, I just wanted to say I'm personally not a huge fan of the randomized light panels. I know that's a weird nitpick and it's a distinctive stylistic choice in Andy's videos, but I don't know, it kind of makes these spaces look sloppier, which I get that it's part of the point probably, but they're just not very aesthetic, you know? He comes across the rover that's been making all of these holes in the walls and look, there's a camera on it with all the info he needs. How convenient. Bro, these scientists have been gone for more than a year, if we believe the last day of maintenance counter on the first portal, but the cameras still have juice? That's a tad unbelievable, but alright. So as this thing drills its holes, we get to look through them, and it seems like the lights turn on as the backrooms become observed by someone. It doesn't seem like the rooms themselves appear, it's like they're already there. Pretty interesting. We see this a couple of times until they decide to put a mirror on this thing to allow it to observe vertically too, and the mirror is a very cool effect. In general, all the mechanical parts of these animations are almost needlessly complex. Well, I guess here I am praising them, so needlessly my ass. It makes for some trippy and insane visuals. Also, again, why did the scientists make everything so aesthetic in these presentations? Do they seriously like aura farm on TikTok or something? Wait, how did they get this shot? It makes no sense. Whatever, I guess. But here we have some pretty insane implications. So what they're saying is that the backrooms are technically under the normal world, and that looking up from here allows you to see in people's homes, so they're using it for surveillance, and that the government's been using them to spy on people. That's a headache and a half, honestly. Also, why is all of this info inside that little camera that they put in this random ass rover? It's again one of those returning details that make everything feel more video gamey. It loses some in realism points, but it's fun, so I can't complain too much. Then there's this cool visual here at the end, with the next room curling in on itself. It really shows more and more that the backrooms are like a living thing. It reminds me of that one found footage film, The Borderlands. Spoilers for the ending, by the way, where you realize that the tunnel is the stomach of a living being and it starts digesting the characters. Terrifying stuff. So now that the protagonist finds out that the emergency portal was just a ruse and these levels he's on are particularly dangerous, he tries to go back, but a new path opens up. Not suspicious at all. The fifth and last entry is a huge 40-minute one, and after a few seconds of seemingly standard exploration, we start seeing new trippy scenes, with the rooms seemingly being connected in the wrong ways, one horizontal and one vertical and stuff. He once again can't help himself but use the same illusory space trick. I get it, it's cool. And at around 240 or so, we have one of the most unique shots I've seen in these types of videos. Through a hole in the wall, he sees the backrooms just flying by at a high speed. It's like his section of the rooms is moving through space very fast. Crazy stuff, man. After a while, he comes across this huge ass mechanism, and he sure loves his gears. And when he activates this thing, it shifts the gravity, so he can now explore the backrooms for a different plane. But who built this? Did the scientists somehow create this physics-breaking giant machine in the backrooms? The same guys that had to use a manual drill's head just to take a small wall samples instead of making a specialized rover from scratch? We're fully in video game land at this point. So our guy goes on exploring and yeah, everything is pretty damn trippy now that the whole perspective has shifted. While it keeps having this same problem of being too damn slow in my opinion, it's still so bizarre and impressive that it kinda just leaves me speechless. After some more dilly-dallying, our protagonist comes across this. Damn. End of the road, bucko. So if it wasn't explicit enough up to this point that the backrooms were a living thing, now they even got tentacles coming out to destroy stuff. As we can see, the tentacles attacked this rover, which once again, very fortunately, has a working camera. Yay! We see that this one had a new piece of equipment, a sort of laser cutter that can make these square holes in the walls. As we watch it do its thing, we start hearing rumbling noises, and it's like its constant zapping of the walls is hurting the backrooms, up to the point they finally react and destroy it with their tentacles. So the main character grabs the laser cutter and mounts it on the camera, finally finding a way to create openings for himself, and listen to that crisp sound design. Good stuff. Whenever he uses the laser, I love how the cuts are always in perspective and imperfect, instead of having perfectly centered squares. It adds to the realism. After some more walking around and traversing the rooms, he comes across a set of doors and... whoa. Damn. At this point, it feels like something completely different. I've never seen spaces like these used in the Backrooms videos. It's such a unique vision. Here something really weird happens. He goes into one of these giant boxes and the tentacles are blocking his way, so he decides to do something about it. But bro, you really gonna cut off the support beams while you're on the stairs connected to the structure? What? Well, that was lucky. Good thing it stopped before destroying the stairs. Also, this guy must be Spider-Man because that shit looks too steep to walk on. Maybe he's just doing like a gecko crawl or something. At this point, we have what could be described as a jump scare for the first time in the project. Damn. Didn't get me though. I'm only scared of manly things like Arnold. Things just keep devolving here. Like, look at this. What am I looking at? It's like when people completely destroy Minecraft servers to the point where you only have random floating blocks around. I feel like he's having way too much fun with this laser cutter. And yeah, no, I give up. I wanna know what the hell is going on here. I'm not sure how to even describe this shit. Towards the end, he comes across this sort of observatory room, at the top of which we can see the bottom of the world. It is pretty terrifying to think you've no-clipped through the ground and that you can even see it looking up. It's definitely a different feeling from the others. It's less mysterious because you can kinda tell where you are, but it feels even more hopeless somehow, because how are you gonna get back up? It's not as simple as no-clipping through another part of the floor. Well, I guess you could turn your gravity upside down. Here shit goes completely video game mode. Like, this is a cross between Portal and Half-Life's gravity gun puzzles. Wait, now it all makes sense. This guy is Gordon Freeman. That's why he doesn't speak. And at this point I wrote in my notes, why did the tentacles attack the rover and not him though? Well, there you go. How is it that whenever I ask questions in this series, it's the exact moment that the answer is given? Are you reading my mind, Andy? So now this straight up becomes an actual FPS game, with the protagonist just shooting at the tentacles, and it all leads to one of the coolest sections ever. Our guy is cornered, so he decides to jump off, and just look at this. That is insane. He just starts flying down through the empty space of the backrooms, constantly avoiding collision by laser cutting his way through obstacles until he reaches the bottom of the normal world, clips through, flips around, and flies through the sky at terminal velocity before crashing into a field. And mind you, not a single syllable was uttered even in such a predicament. He couldn't just give us a little or something. Stoic till the bitter end, huh? So that was the end of NDR Animation's Backrooms. While it did feel like a sudden and kinda rushed ending, almost as if he thought, alright, I'm done with this project, it's also so insane and high octane that I can't really complain about it. Overall, I think that this was kinda phenomenal in many ways, but not all. So when it comes to animation, ideas, environments, sound design, trippiness, this is absolutely S tier. But listen, it can't be denied that in other departments, which ironically enough to me seem like they would have been actually the easier parts, it's kinda lacking. First of all, something that I'm more neutral on is the pacing. As I said, it is very slow, it lingers a lot in some of these environments, and personally I think it could have used some more time in the editing room to trim some of the fat. At the same time, I see how someone could appreciate this, because it means that we spend more time in the backrooms. I just found it a bit unfortunate how I ended up fast forwarding through a few of these sections. Usually I'm pretty patient and can get immersed in this kind of stuff, but this one, well, it challenged me a bit, okay? Besides that, my number one complaint would probably be our main character. I don't understand why he just shuts up after the first scene. He doesn't even react to anything. It's like he gets replaced by a robot or something. I get that part of it is just allowing the viewer to get immersed and feel like they're the protagonist, but you know, even those longer, more tedious sections could have been more entertaining if he just spoke a bit, and it would have allowed us to actually feel something when he is in active danger at the end and when he supposedly dies. And I joked about this throughout, but the silent protagonist really adds to the feeling of this being a video game. And that's my second big complaint. Listen, I like some of the Backrooms video games, especially Dreamcore, which is arguably the most uneventful out of them all. But when you have direct control of your protagonist, it's one thing. When you're just vicariously watching as somebody else walks around, well, it's not as effective. There's so many elements that feel kinda gamified, like the protagonist basically following arrows that point him in the right direction, him interacting with the tapes and cameras that give him all the info about what's going on, the procedural nature of everything, like go to the first location, now go to outpost 2, now go to the third location, oh, path interrupted, look for a different path, etc. This is not even bringing in the environmental puzzles and that little FPS moment towards the end. And I guess the biggest problem for me is that it often also feels like it's using video game logic and it's completely unrealistic. I'm still baffled by how these scientists supposedly built this giant gravity changing mechanism, but hey, I might just be reading too much into it. I just think it would have been more interesting to have some sort of story in this, which I know might sound contradictory after I sort of complained about it at the start of Kane's series, but as I said, he actually managed to win me over and made me realize that the story enhanced the experience of his videos. It goes a long way to make projects like these more memorable. While I have the feeling that this is not the last one we'll see that kinda just does away with the story, in the end it can often feel like a technical showcase which makes you go, whoa, because, well, the technical stuff is superb and some of these set pieces are genuinely incredible. But I already know that this is not gonna stick in my mind as much because of it. I don't want to call it outright shallow because that would be quite mean, but I guess what I'm saying is that you can see where most of NDR Animation's attention went to, the animation, unsurprisingly. But besides that, I can't put this anywhere below an A tier. While it might not be for everyone, I think everyone will agree on how high quality it is. Now, we've been a bit too positive so far. We all know there's some real slop out there when it comes to Backrooms content. So while searching for different series, I came across this channel named Vaporama Vision. And just look at these thumbnails. Big Bloop versus Megalodon vibes, you know? It definitely seems like the kind of stuff that becomes viral on Instagram or TikTok, which is often kinda slop. Let's check it out and see if this one follows that trend. So, Vaporama Vision's series is frustrating. The best thing I can say about it is that, first, it's doing its own thing. This is very clearly a specific and wet look at the Backrooms. It focuses primarily on the pool rooms and their derivatives. Its main thing is obviously a mix of megalophobia and thalassophobia baiting set pieces plunged in this dreamlike landscape that, as you can see, is pretty far removed from the other stuff we've checked out today. It uses distinct recurring features and locations and has its own sort of loose existential concept behind it. I haven't watched each upload by them because it doesn't really seem like there's a concrete narrative here and because, to be quite honest, it can be pretty tedious. But the main idea seems to be that our protagonist or protagonists get trapped in these otherworldly spaces by some higher entities that seem to play with them for their own twisted motives. They seem to be also communicating with the characters, or with us, the viewers, through these quotes that we can find at the start or at the end of the videos. And they say lugubrious shit like, "I have never had a home more than this place has had me. Its heart burns within, and its embrace feels eternal. I have wandered along the paths it laid ahead, one after another. I am not alone now, for I am at home at last." A bit silly maybe, but I see the vision. It's also clear both in the aesthetic choices and in the channel's whole identity that there's a light vaporwave twist here. Half of these episodes made me want to crack open a good old Arizona iced tea, which I guess is kind of unique, although I might have just not watched enough Backrooms videos yet, and I'll find out that there are a dime a dozen doing this vaporwave twist. The other nice thing I can say is that the series has definitely grown when compared to the first uploads. You see, when I started watching this, I was ready to kinda shit on it without taking it seriously because these first videos are exactly what I expected from the backroom horror slop you can find across platforms. These are compilations of short videos, possibly meant for Instagram, judging by the format, all basically ending up in some cheap scare using what I'm pretty sure are just publicly available and ready-made 3D assets that look completely out of place. How out of place, you ask? Well, maybe this Roblox ass looking Slenderman knockoff, or perhaps this How to Train Your Dragon ass lizard, or fucking Samara from The Ring will give you a good idea. Yeah, not the best creative choices here. The backrooms themselves also feel weirdly amorphous, with no clear continuous structure, but rather often just randomly changing into new areas. And while some of these set pieces can look kind of good, they also can feel a bit anonymous. I don't know if adding the squiggles on the walls was meant to give a more recognizable look, but it just seems like something out of a 2009 creepypasta. Squiggles that were apparently written by Tupac. I guess that the Hellenistic statues also play into the vaporwave vibe, maybe? Yeah, as you can see, it's pretty hard to say anything about these first uploads. It all boils down to,
ooh, spooky place. Oh no, spooky monster. The end.
But then I guess that something changed. Not enough to make this a great series in my opinion, but enough to make me not dismiss it. First of all, the format became widescreen, so I'm guessing these uploads were specifically meant for YouTube now, and they're not just compilations of clips anymore. These are actually long-form explorations inside these dreamy landscapes. It's like the creator actually wants us to experience the vibes now instead of throwing flipped assets in our faces. And while this is definitely an improvement, I feel like there's still a long way to go. Sure, it has gained more vibes and it can be taken more seriously, but it still feels kinda empty. And it's not like the silly entities are totally absent now, they just don't jump out every 30 seconds. If the objective was to create a dreamlike atmosphere that could sometimes turn nightmarish and make you feel that sense of megalophobia and even vertigo, they succeeded in their goal. In fact, I feel like if this was a VR experience, it might actually make you shit bricks, but that's kind of it. There's really not enough meat on these bones here, which takes us to the most frustrating part about this whole project. Vaporama's channel was demonetized for inauthentic/mass-produced content, probably because YouTube's automated system flagged it as AI content. This prompted Vaporama to try and fund a bigger and more professional project on Kickstarter, which unfortunately didn't take off. To be fair, a $164,000 goal seems a bit steep for a project like this. I get that there's commissions, taxes and other expenses, but still, feels kinda big. Although, if anybody's ever worked in the industry and has some insight, please do share in the comments, because I might be way off. If I use Get Right on it, it estimates the budget in the same ballpark as some of the lower settings, so I might be just stupid. Anyway, Vaporama states that he doesn't use AI and no AI would ever be used at any stage of the project. Which, hello, base department? Unfortunately, that's not coming to fruition and the money has been reimbursed. And apparently the channel will still be demonetized for now, if we look at the conversation on X. YouTube has given him the usual automated corpo babble, probably, apparently giving him some broad BS about updating his channel before reapplying for monetization at the end of June. Of course, we don't have the full context of their conversation. There might be more going on here than I realized, but this would definitely not be the first time YouTube pulls something like this. And all of this makes my fucking blood boil. This site is a cesspool of AI-generated content farms that are absolutely thriving, and your automatic content detection, which at this point I'm sure is itself fully AI, because the ironies never fucking end with you people, arbitrarily decides that the person that needs to be demonetized is some guy that is actually making 3D animations. If Vaporama has been transparent with the audience in this whole situation, then I can't even imagine what he must be mentally going through. The goal to have your broken AI system go and disrupt the livelihood of real creators on this platform is fucking insane. I hope that this situation gets resolved as soon as possible. I hope that some bigger YouTuber might come across this and land Vaporama a hand. In the meanwhile, I wish them nothing but the best, and even though their series was not exactly for me, I hope that all of you watching can go over to their channel and show some support during this undoubtedly shitty time. And just as a quick aside, whenever I say some negative things about AI, the worms always come out of the woodwork complaining about AI fear-mongering or some shit like that. First of all, you're a drone, your opinion doesn't matter, but thanks for the free engagement. Second, there you go. Now you can see at least one example of real direct damage that your garbage AI slop can cause. Hope you're happy and proud of yourself, champ. So that really soured the mood. At this point the script is pretty damn long, so I would end it here for now. But if this video does well, I'd be very happy to keep going with the list. Tell me in the comments and like, subscribe, kiss me gently on the cheek, you know the drill. For now, goodbye and see you space life forms.